welcome to this technique tutorial. My name is Samantha Wiltshire, and today we're going to be covering simple geometry for construction. And you'll see here that on my first slide, I have an image of an artwork where I've been using that simple geometry to build a person. All right, so today we're going to be going through our lesson objectives. We're going to be discussing the equipment we'll need. We'll be understanding using rectilinear geometry for construction. We'll be having a practice of that together, and then we'll be concluding and going through some references and further activities. Right, so our goals for today are to see in brand new ways as an artist using simple geometry. We want to work on achieving more accurate proportion by simplifying forms. We want to improve our realism, and we want to understand how to begin an artwork more easily. For today's activity, you're going to need a simple reference image of your choice or a printout of the owl featured later in these slides. You'll need a light HB pencil for construction, any drawing material which will show up on your printed reference image. So I'll be using soft pastel today. You could also use chalk or marker. You'll need a hard and a soft eraser. You'll want some drawing paper. Any basic paper is fine today because we're just going to be practicing the construction. These aren't going to become fully developed drawings unless you decide to continue them in your own time. And you also may like to use a skewer, ruler, piece of string, or a knitting needle if you would like to combine today's skill set with any background understanding that you might already have of how to measure comparatively for proportion. All right, so using rectilinear geometry, what do we mean by rectilinear? We mean any shape which is rectangular or triangular in nature, which has sharp edges. So all rectilinear forms are characterized by sharp edges and straight lines. And so some of the sorts of shapes that I tend to use to construct when I use this process are squares, rectangles, rhombus, parallelogram, triangle, and trapezium. And so you'll see that in the picture on the right, I've taken a how to draw instruction book and I've laminated a page and I've gone over with a whiteboard marker and I've mapped in how I could break that form down further into really simple rectilinear shapes. And that will mean that I can draw this cuttlefish a lot more easily than if I tried to just launch straight in and guess where to start. All right, so now we're going to be practicing using simple geometry for construction together. Take a moment to screenshot and print this slide to follow along with me, or you might like to use your own reference image from home. And in this exercise, we will not be focusing on measuring techniques. You may integrate measuring, though, if you wish to get further accuracy, and if that's a skill set that you've already built through watching our other tutorial videos, or maybe with your classroom teacher. All right, so the first step that we're going to complete is we'll use our reference picture and we're going to use that drawing tool that you prepared earlier to make the big shapes on that reference image itself. You can see that digitally, I've gone through that same process here on this slide for the picture of my owl. We're going to, once we found them, map these shapes on our page and then work from our largest shapes into the smaller shapes. So let's jump over to my drawing station and have a go. All right, so the first sort of construction that we're going to be doing today is the simple geometry construction method, where we're going to be using those really sharp and angular rectilinear shapes rather than anything curvy like ellipses or circles. So I've got my reference picture here of my little owl, and I've got myself a like a red soft pastel, but anything that you have at home that will show up on a dark printed image is perfect. And I'm going to start by just finding those big shapes to begin with. I want to keep it nice and simple, easy. So I'm looking to not overcomplicate it. I'm looking to start with the biggest things I can see. One of those things that I can see is this shape right here for the wing. And then I can also see a bit of a rectangular type shape or a diamond shape. And I can see that there's also a line which just goes straight down into a rectangle on the other side. And I know that that's curvy. I can see that that's actually a curved shape, but remember, we're keeping it very boxy. We're making a robot owl, right? I can see a line that goes the whole way up like so. I can see a triangle. I can see a nice trapezium shape. I can see another triangle. And I can see 2 triangles right there to make the ear. I can go straight across down to make the eye. And I can do a little square to make the eye on the other side. In fact, I can see a better way that I could have done that instead. I could come straight down here like this, then just pop a line across where I know that my beak is going to go. Now I'm just cleaning up with my eraser to really make sure that I can see very clearly where each line stops and starts. This is actually even better with something like a colored pencil or a colored pen rather than a thick piece of pastel. If you have that available to you, you can get much finer lines. And there I have it. There's my boxy construction done. So the next thing that I'll be doing is starting to transfer these big shapes to make my construction. Now, what we're not going to be doing today is we're not going to be measuring too heavily. There'll be another video which is all about measuring techniques. Today, we're just going to do the minimum that we have to do in order to get a feeling of our owl. And so the very first thing that I want to understand is where this line between the head and the wing should go. So I can see that's one length of my head. One length of my head goes into it 1, 2, almost 3 times. So I'm going to decide where I would like my owl to start. Doesn't matter whether I'm scaling him up or scaling him down. And I want to decide where I would like for him to end, around about, maybe around there. And then let me decide where I would like this point right here to be. I think maybe around about there. Let's take a look and see how correct I might be. See, 1. Sometimes I put a little dash or I might hold my finger 2 and almost 3. That feels pretty right. I might move that down just a touch so it's a little bit closer to that kind of 3/4 of the third length of the head. So that's what I'm going to start with. The next thing I want to decide is where I would like for the edge of my face to be compared to where I would like the edge of my wing to be. And I'm going to start by just guesstimating as best as I can and by plotting in some of these shapes. So I have a bit more to work with when I'm trying to do that. So when I'm trying to get my line the right angle, sometimes I'll test that angle. I'll go, oh, let me try and get the same feeling. I can also think almost about like a compass point. So north, south, east, west. If I think about that particular angle, where would that sit on a compass? And sometimes thinking about that helps me to get that line correct as well. And then I can see one that's going to go down for the side of his face. I know that I found the line there for the top of the wing and that there is an angle for this first trapezium right here. And I'm testing again because I'm thinking about the top of his little head. That's feeling already way too wide. I can tell something's gone awry. So this might be another opportunity for me to integrate some measuring. So how many times does the width of the face, maybe on its bottom edge? So we're thinking about it not as a face if we can help it. So my bad, I slipped up then. Rather than thinking about it as being a face, let's change the way we talk. Let's think about it as just being a trapezium. So I'm going to measure the length of the bottom of my trapezium into the height. That's going to go 1 and almost half. Let me see if I've got the same thing going on. See, 1. Whoa, mine is way, 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 way off. So I'm going to be changing mine. I'm going to be bringing this line in. And I'm going to be bringing this line in as well. Because I can move things around, I am not committed to these lines. Absolutely not. This is the stage where I want to be moving these lines around because I haven't done any detail just yet. So let's take a look now. 1, 2. Let me check again. I might need to remind myself. 1 and just a little bit longer than half. Just a little bit longer than half. Ooh, that's probably around about right, but I'm also going to be flicking my eye back and forth for a minute, playing spot the difference, seeing what else I can see. Then I can move on to my next big shape. Now you'll notice I'm not going into any of what's happening in the face. Absolutely not. I really want to be patient and take my time. There's no rush for me to do anything which is little. I want to put little things into big things and start with those largest shapes first. Sometimes I might see how these shapes line up. So I can see that, careful if you're using pastel like me not to get that all over your drawing. I can see that that lines up almost with the edge of the face, but not quite, to get that large wing shape in. Now I'm paying attention to not only this shape and this shape, but what's this triangular shape in between, and is mine big enough? You'll notice that I go over my lines quite a few times, and that's primarily so that you can really easily see what I'm doing on the camera, but you might find that it's unnecessary to go over your lines so many times. And what you'll find will happen is that your work will get quite messy, and there'll be lines that you're not able to rub out. There'll be little marks on your page that you don't want when you are eventually ready to go into some total work, if you take the same approach as me and go over to make your lines darker. You want your construction lines to be as light as you can possibly make them when you're trying this out for yourself. All right, now I can afford to go into some more of this little detail. You can't see because it's off the screen over here, but I often use my pinky as a support. When I'm trying to make a nice straight line, I use my pinky, I rest it on the page, and it just gives me a little bit more guidance to do that. I'm double checking my angles. This needs to be a little bit straighter. This area needs a little bit less space in there. I didn't have enough room in here. So as I put more shapes in, I'm checking their relationships with the other shapes to decide whether I've left enough space. Right, so now I've got my basic big shapes in. I can see my trapeziums, I can see my triangles, I can see my rectangles where I need them. I really want to take my time to correct and to double check. The reason being because I know that when I'm ready to do my tonal work, it's going to be very difficult for me to come back and make those changes then. All right, so now I've mapped in majority of my big shapes, and I've done that fairly quickly. If this was a video about measuring, we would have been triple checking all of these relationships as we go. We would not have got to this stage without really slowing it right down and making sure that our relationships between the lengths of everything are correct. In this case, I'm not wanting it to be so much about accuracy in terms of measurements, but I really would like to feel as though my shapes are fairly true to what I'm seeing here. So I'm going to take a moment now to stop, to flick my eyes back and forth and place spot the difference. If you want to, you can even turn both your reference picture and your drawing upside down, and that will force your brain to stop thinking about this as being an owl and to start instead to think about this just in terms of the shapes that we can see that we've drawn on the picture. It kind of confuses our brain a little bit, and it's like taking a break, coming back to that drawing and seeing it fresh. So now's the time before we finish up our construction to make sure that you're happy with these shapes. I'm also at this stage going to rub out any lines which I no longer need because I really don't want them to be a distraction moving forward. Right, so the next step is going to be to make corrections and explore our small details. So we're going to begin by mapping on our reference picture anything additional that might be required. So you might put in some additional markings to help you to find the shape of the inside of the eye area, or maybe some of the feathers. So you're going to begin by adding in those small details wherever you might require them. You might also want to start checking for some more accuracy and tidying up or making any changes that you might need to make if you spot things which aren't quite correct. So the best way to do that is to flick your eyes back and forth and place spot the difference between the reference picture and your drawing. You can also, if you wish, use any other comparative measuring tools that you might already have in your tool belt in order to make those corrections as well. You might also at this stage want to erase your markings on your reference picture as the very last thing you do, just to get rid of any excess lines you may have placed in that might actually be covering up subtle changes in shape or subtle details that you might want to be aware of. All right, so once you're happy with your basic structure, you can then go into those next layers of detail. So that's going to be things like the inside of your eye. I could come in and I can make that next trapezium for the inside of that eye. And I can mark in with a little line where the inside of that other eye is going to go. I can map in also, for example, extra little details, like if I erase that line here, and you may well find yourself taking back lines in order to do a really good job of this. Rather than just one line, I might find it helpful to now have 2 lines there to make that wing. All right, so you can see the beginnings of me coming in and starting to give this some more detail. I can also come in and start to find where the curve of the beak is. And I would progress from here, going gradually into smaller and smaller details as I find them. So start with your basic shapes like we have together here today, and then see how far you can progress at home. See how much detail you can now map in this way. And you'll see here that I have my finished base construction of my owl, but there's actually more correcting that I still could have done if I really wanted, a hyper real result, or if I really wanted to achieve as much accuracy as possible. I wonder if you want to take a minute now to practice flicking your eyes back and forth and see if you can spot the difference for yourself. If you spot a way that I could have improved, come and let me know in the studio, or maybe drop a comment in the comments down below. And make sure when you're finishing your construction not to forget to curve your edges. You want to curve these edges because otherwise you'll end up with a very robotic and very stiff looking final result. So if you're struggling with finding your curves and making them exactly as they should be, remember that you can use diagonal lines to help you find the character of that curve. You'll see here I have an octopus. I was constructing this octopus using basic simple geometry. A lot of that I have now erased at this point. And you'll see that I am going ahead and smoothing out those edges and even starting to add some tonal work. I've added in some blue highlighter on this image, the way that I have used diagonal lines to find the exact right curve of that curled up tentacle. If you'd like to continue practicing this skill set at home, start by finding more simple shapes. So print out a variety of images and practice drawing the shapes on those images with marker or pastel on top of the printout. And practice makes perfect. So select maybe a few of your favorite of these for activity number 2 and complete these as full constructions, or maybe even as full drawings with tonal work if you're feeling like you're ready for that. And here we have some of our image and academic references today. Feel free to go through and take a look if you're interested in some further reading. And our long-term goal with this skill set is to practice seeing and drawing the simple geometry in all subjects until it feels really natural to do so. And we also want to work on deciding whether this construction method works best for our practice, or maybe this isn't your cup of tea. That's okay as well. We're all just on a bit of a journey trying to find what works for us. Thank you so much for your time, and happy art making.